Hello, everybody. Kyle Allen from Vaco. Jessika Poirier Hatchell is my guest today. So excited.
Hey, good
Kind of continuing
morning.
our journey on just career development. And there's been a ton of talk on building your own network. We get this question a lot. We get a lot of people that come to us and saying, hey, I need a new job. Don't have a network. They rely on us. And we love that. We love
Yeah,
being your network. But I think we want to talk today a little bit and share a little bit about how to do that. But before we do that, Jessika, tell us a little bit about you, how you got to Vaco, how long you've been here, your role here.
sure.
We'll dive in.
Yeah, it was about almost 12 years ago. I came to Vaco looking for a new job. And so I got really lucky and brought into the fold. And, networking was a huge part of my career, especially in the beginning. And on both the recruiting and the business development side, it's so important to have relationships. So I'm excited
Sure.
to talk with you about this.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, if you guys have any questions as normal, put them in the comments. I'll get to them. But one to kind of dive in, Jess, is we're talking about building your network. There's a lot of questions around that. People get really scared what to do. I think what's really changed through this is just the online networking we can do now. Just as far as the last 18 months, that's the only networking we've had through COVID.
Sure.
Talk about that a little bit as far as just how does somebody network online
Mhm.
behind a computer to make their network larger? How would they go about doing that?
Sure. Well, I'll be honest. Before pandemic, I really enjoyed doing all the in-person networking. I love to go to all the events, and I was really apprehensive about this whole online thing. I'm not very technical, and
Yeah.
getting in front of the screen seems scary. But it's actually been really efficient, and I think if you're purposeful about your follow-up, that it can actually be more meaningful. Instead of filling up an hour of time, you might fill up 10 minutes of time but with stuff you really want to talk about.
Yeah. Well, I think too, just on the where we are with Twitter and LinkedIn, and you're trying to, because I think everybody looks at us and like, oh, we got to go to a recruiter and we're the job factory and we're going to pull a job off the shelf and hand it to you. It's not really how it works for us. It's a lot about timing and networking and talking to our clients and where the needs are,
Mhm.
predicting things and having the right people. But I think for you, obviously we would love to say, hey, we're the only way to find a job in the market. It's not true, right? We're definitely an avenue. But for you individually, as to going on LinkedIn, Twitter, making comments, connecting with people, DMing folks, as far as sending direct messages to them directly. And to talk about that, Jess, as far as
Sure.
how
Yeah.
you reach candidates or how you've reached individuals, you're like, hey, I really need to get to know this individual because of the skill set they have, or
Sure.
for you're like, hey, I need to get to know somebody with this background.
Yeah. One thing I've learned this year from some other folks in our office is actually that how important when you're on social media, instead of just putting out your own content, really paying attention to what others are putting out. And like you're saying, engage with them, interact, comment on what they're posting, get a conversation going back and forth. And if it makes sense, follow up after that, have another one-on-one Zoom meeting or go to lunch if that's something you're comfortable with. But go ahead and engage with what other people are putting out there as well, not just your own.
Yeah, I think that is most, and Taylor Dess in our office talks about this a lot
Mhm.
consistently, and how much this has helped his followers, and it's
Yeah.
so true as far as engaging with people that you want to be engaged with, right?
Right.
And anytime somebody engages with me or asks thoughtful type questions, I'm 100%. I'll talk about what I was talking about,
Sure.
or if somebody sends me a comment today about, hey, Kyle, follow up question to your networking. I'm like, I will answer it, you know.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's just a good way to kind of be inquisitive and give some knowledge there.
It's almost easier
Yeah,
now than it was before because you might have been in a room with 100 other people who all had, a handful of folks on their list that they wanted to talk to that day, and you're all fighting for that FaceTime. Now you have the opportunity any time of day to log on, connect with somebody, and when it's convenient for them, start the conversation.
Jess, what's crazy is really this is the easiest way to network for people that don't like networking,
It is,
and
yeah.
and most people would say they don't even view this as networking, right?
Right.
And so behind a computer, send them a note, a message, whatever it may be, is the easiest, most practical way to network, especially
Right.
COVID and even post COVID. So I
Yeah.
think just getting an online presence, getting a LinkedIn profile, putting yourself out there as far as this
Absolutely.
is who I am. And
You know,
also
we
too,
call
just
it
go ahead.
when we call it networking, it seems so intimidating,
I
right? It
know.
seems like this big bear that we have to tackle when really this is just conversations
That's all
and
it is.
building relationships with other people, getting to know what they do, letting them know what you do. So
Totally,
if we
totally.
kind of break it down to the ridiculous, it kind of makes it less scary.
Yep. So Jess, I'm 24 years old. I just moved to Nashville. I have a new job I found through a recruiting agency like Vaco. And I know the importance of getting involved in the community
Yeah,
network. If I'm 24 years old in Nashville, where do I start? How do I start
great
building a
question.
network? And what do I do?
Great question. Well, I think generally early in our careers, the thing we have the most of is time. And so investing that back into your community, back into the interests that are actually aligned with, things that are important to you can be the most fruitful. I would start by looking at some organizations in Nashville, like the Center for Nonprofit Management, YP Nashville, the Chamber of Commerce, Junior Chamber. They're all going to have a lot of organizations that you could connect with and find just a few that seem to align with you. Try them out. And if it fits, become the mayor. Go to every event. Get to know everyone in the room. Get to know what they do. And I think good things will follow. Opportunities will
Yeah.
show up.
I think there's such a big need for younger professionals to kind of join some of these boards. I mean, I know there's a couple nonprofit boards I'm on. We all have young professionals
Yeah,
on the board learning how they're volunteering their time, finding out how kind of things operate, and they can kind of get a view of the entire organization to kind of see where they want to dive in and where they want to give back even
totally.
more. And so I think that's really, really important on that front.
Hmm.
Um, Talk about a little bit about, okay, as we're getting involved or just networking in general. I think the big fear is like, okay, I don't really know anybody.
Hmm.
I only know a couple people and they're not going to the event or this board meeting. Like,
Yeah.
walk me through kind of, okay, walking into a room of 150
Yeah.
people.
Well,
What do you do?
I would take us all back to grade school or summer camp where you had to have the buddy system and you couldn't let that buddy out of your sight. Go with somebody that you want to have common goals of, networking, building your relationships with people, and introduce each other to the people you know. Don't start necessarily with a target list of people that you want to do business with, but just, hey, I know Joe. Joe, do you know Susie? And I think a really effective way to do this is to start with a fun fact about each of them. So there's a starting ground for conversation, a very natural place to start. Now, each of those two people can loop one more person into the conversation. And sooner rather than later, you've got a whole group of people in the room it just gets a lot more comfortable to walk around the room, make eye contact, and start a conversation once you have that confidence.
Totally. Talk about too this. You do a good job with this, Jess, as far as creating genuine relationships
Yeah.
and conversation, and not where, hey, Jess, I'm meeting you for the first time. And as soon as I meet you, I'm spitting out a 45-second elevator pitch about what I
Mhm.
do and how you can help me.
Right.
How does that feel when somebody does that and then somebody is just genuinely getting to know Jessica
Sure.
and how you lean in differently?
Yeah. I think we all feel the difference when we're approached by somebody with that elevator speech and they're handing us their card. You know, Ultimately, do we all want to do business together? Yes. But it starts with having some trust, which needs to be earned in the relationship. So, really just having that conversation, asking 2 or 3 questions a little deeper about their business. And I would encourage you to have a goal of walking away from a networking event knowing 2 to 3 people enough that you would be comfortable following up with them in a genuine way. I think most of the influential relationships I had in networking never started out that way. There are a handful of
Oh,
people in my world that we just tend to help each other a lot because they're connectors. But when I first met those people, neither one of us probably ever thought it would land there. So just build the relationship, have that long term view in mind, a short term of some information, but a long term of the relationship. And I think you'll see a lot of value long term.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because I think so many young kids today, I call them kids because they are, is just like, well, I did it twice, Jessica, and it just didn't work. And so I'm not going to do that anymore. Or I'm not going to go, or
Sure.
nobody knew me or anything. And so I think that's the biggest things you're thinking about, like just in your career and how you're building your network. Like it's not a light switch you just don't flip on. Like,
Mm-mm.
I've been in this market, we'll call it 15, 16, 17 years now. And like, it just takes time.
It
Right.
does. Yeah.
And for people to get to know who you are, but I think a lot of that too, Jessica, it just comes from just genuine relationships and genuine
Hmm.
conversation, and not from a sense of like, okay, what can you do for me now?
That's
How can
right.
you
And
help me?
realistically, we only have a certain amount of energy and time, right?
I know,
So I would
totally.
say try out a bunch of different organizations or groups, pick the 2 or 3 that seem to fit you best, and just show up as much as you can. I wouldn't be selective on which events you think you're going to get more out of. Just show
Just
up,
show
be
up.
yourself, be there. There's one group that I've been a part of for my entire career at Vaco, and it took quite a long time for me to develop relationships there. But now, 12 years later, I'm seeing lots of dividends from that. And it's actually a lot more fun because these are people that I genuinely care about now. So I think it looks different for everyone. You got to have some short term wins, but really, in the end, it's that long term relationship.
No, totally. And I think that's the biggest thing is just like being genuine, connect with it. Because I think so many people are just like, I think the word is just transactional, right?
Yeah,
It's
that's a
just,
great word. Yeah.
yeah. And they're trying to close a deal, or they're needing this for their business, or they're checking a box because their boss is forcing them to come to a
Yeah.
networking event. Like, don't go to I mean, people are like, well, I'm going to go to a networking event if my boss says to go to a networking event, but like really look at the why behind the what. Like, why is he encouraging you to get he or she involved in
Hmm.
networking events or nonprofit organizations? Like, it's for the betterment of your career and
Sure.
to broaden your just view. Honestly, for me, a couple of boards that I'm on, Uprise here in Nashville
Oh, yeah, great
is
group.
one that I'm on. Is just, man, just the stories that I hear about as far as people coming out of um, poverty and
Sure.
homelessness into a career training, and now becoming CDL drivers or medical, getting their certification in some kind of medical field.
Hmm.
Man, they're awesome stories, and like, man,
Awesome.
it gives you
Yeah.
hope, right? And so
Yep.
it just makes you a good person, if
It
anything,
does. Yeah,
right?
it helps you get out of
So
your own head, and
yeah,
it's inspiring, and you remember that, there's lots of ways to get to an end goal, and it's more fun when you're doing it together.
yeah, no, for sure. Jessica, you mentioned too, real quick, on just, and I want to hit on this because I think everybody in general, I don't want people to think, oh, Jessica and Kyle love to network. If you give me 10 things to do, I'm not sure I'm going to pick to go network in a room I don't know, right? But I mean, I
Right.
do it, and some people find it easier than others. But I think
Yeah.
just talk about, like, most people dread this, right?
Mhm.
And I want to say the importance of knowing that, of like everybody walking in that room, most people are uncomfortable. So know
Yes.
that, right? One.
Yes.
And two, I think really emphasizing kind of the buddy system, because there's probably even some people at Vaco that we work with that we would say, oh, they're a great producer. They're super confident.
Right.
And then, one person comes to mind that she's like, it's an individual lady here. And she's like, I hate this stuff, Kyle. Help me, please. You know? And so, I think
Yeah.
you just never know. And I consider her a pretty confident lady. And she's like, I hate this stuff. How do I get
Mhm.
better? Right. And so I think that shows, like, you never know. And like, it's okay to ask for help on how to network, right? I mean, you talk about that a little bit. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think there are seasons in our life where we enjoy it more than others. There are times where we're more confident in one group because we have a knowledge base of the subject matter. And there are times where we feel, really inferior. And it's okay. Feel the feeling and show up anyway.
Yeah.
Just be yourself. And people, I think, appreciate vulnerability, even if that means saying, I'm kind of nervous to be here. People
Totally.
appreciate the honesty.
Yeah, I think that matters. So I was like, oh, and honestly, for me, I've had a few people that I haven't known say that to me in the past, and I'm like, oh, well, let me help you. Let me introduce you to a few. That just makes me trigger, like, you
Yes,
know what? Let me
yes,
help her or him. It says a lot. It takes a
absolutely.
lot to say that.
Mhm.
But even saying, gosh, I dread these things, or I dread coming here, et
Sure.
cetera, et cetera. And a lot of times people are like, oh yeah, me too. Or two, like somebody like me, like, well, let me introduce you to a couple people And, I've already talked to them a little bit. I understand what they do. I'm immediately saying, oh, you should probably meet so-and-so since you do X, Y, and Z, right?
Right. And I would bet that if somebody's really good at the networking face to face and there might be some unicorns out there, but they're probably not as good on the research side, on the digging in. You might buddy up with somebody who that's their strength, and they can do a little bit of homework and say, hey, here are some groups or people that we could really mutually benefit from connecting with.
Totally.
And then you help each other get the best of both worlds. We don't have to be good at everything.
Yeah. Jessika, email address for you if anybody's wanting to get a hold of you.
Jessika with a K at Vaco.com. Super easy.
Very easy. Jessika, this was awesome today. Building your network. You're one of the best in town that does it, that gets around.
I got a lot of help. I
And
appreciate
you have absolutely. Look forward to another conversation soon down the road. Appreciate the time, Jessika.
All right. Have a good one.
All right. Bye.